started painting when I was 5 years old. My first painting was a slice of watermelon. So I've been painting ever since. I started out as a printmaker, thinking in layers because of printmaking, and in reverse, because in lithography you draw it on the image would be drawn on a stone or on a plate, and then the actual image from that would be in reverse, and usually in black and white. So I started that in the 80s, and then started drawing and painting, and I was adapting some of the concepts of those processes into painting. So I've just developed my style over the last 35 years. So for my work, it's constructed from the ground up. So it's like I construct my own panels, make special preparations for the gesso layer, multiple layers. So it's actually, there was an old quote from Paul Klee. He said, the drawing is constructed bit by bit like a house. So that's what I do with my paintings. It's actually literally constructed bit by bit until it's actually finished. So the sky may have 9 layers in it to get that look. You can't mix paint and get that look without the layers. And that's what's kind of important. It's like, so the actual whites are actually go down to the gesso layer. This is actually started out as a glaze, and then I burn the glaze out to create the contrast. So they're actually not painted, they're actually formed. It would be a base layer of blue, so a glaze would start there, and then I'd go back in and burn it out. So I use a Damar-based glaze system, and denatured alcohol will actually melt that, or actually burn it away. There's a number of other solvents that would work as well, but it does it quickly enough without bleeding. If I use, say, turpentine, which is one of the components of the Damar glaze, it would actually be more diffuse because it doesn't flash off as fast. So you'd have, say like composition problems, or if you put one color against another color and it doesn't work, you're just constantly trying to make adjustments so everything works in harmony. At least with my pieces, I'm not trying to cause dissonance, I'm trying to create a feeling of peace and harmony in my pieces. So it's a constant adjustments of trying to provide that ultimate thing. I don't want a static piece going on, I want a dynamic piece, but yet it needs to be peaceful and restful within those parameters. And these paintings, so with this, the theme was streaming, so there's these different things that go through your mind. It's like, well, streaming, what can that mean? It's like, well, obviously a stream, or light streaming through a cloud, or you can get something maybe a little more playing on words like jet streaming, so there's contrails and stuff going on, or obviously the jet stream's a wind system going through, but just playing off some of those ideas, using that theme to create a piece or a framework for the pieces to start with. Solving those things is like, okay, well, if there's streaming, we've got to come up with a way of doing that, and or something just like this different looking contrail system going up through, and that becomes the theme of the piece. And just solving problems with a small piece, there are different problems with a larger piece. And the larger the piece goes, the more they need to be solved, because you can't really fake a large piece. And a lot of times with my piece, what I start out with it's called sacred geometry, so you've heard of the golden section and such like that. So I use a grid system, so I do a full-size drawing of what's going on. So a lot of my problems are solved in the drawing stage. So if something's going on that's not working, before I even put different colors of paint on them, I'm solving a lot of the problems that potentially could come up. And then I've painted enough over the years that I know how to solve a lot of some of the problems that are just come up. There might be little problems. A bigger problem, if it's not working, usually I can go back to the composition and using the different proportions. I spent a lot of time doing drawings, especially in school. So some of my drawings would take 80 hours. It was all black and white. So all that stuff's pretty well hardwired into me. the values going with it. So any of these pieces, if you actually took a photo in black and white, they would still work very well. They don't have to have color. It's adjusted, so that's the neat thing with painting. You can make it adjusted. And so if I say had maybe a photograph that represented something like this, this tree might not be here, or this little bush might not be here. So it's like, for the composition, I can actually put a bush in there, or move it, or same thing with the cloud. I can moosh them out, or make them whatever they need to do to fit that grid system. And I've been doing that for probably 30 years, adjusting things, making it work that way. And then at some point, it's like the painting's going to dictate what's going on. Especially towards the end, it's like, well, something else is needed, the paintings, and so it becomes a conversation between me and the painting. What is needed for that to work. As far as the scene, it could be something as little as like a little shadow on a tree, or an interesting bend in a river, or kind of almost anything. The interesting thing is traveling, you use the same brain processes as you do painting. So it's interesting. So travel and painting are very similar. But traveling, it's just like there's just change of scenery. You're moving through time, space, processing information. Some of it's just going past, and it's there, but you're eliminating a lot of stuff too, because there's so much information. And I like to get rid of the extraneous stuff that's in there. I don't like to have a whole, the sign of man or buildings or stuff like that rarely happens in my work. It becomes pure landscape. So it comes middle space that way, because it is pure landscape, and it's actually, you're eliminating a lot of the stuff that would naturally be there in a photograph. It's not so much that it would be necessarily litter or something like that, because there'd be maybe 10 other bushes that are in here that I wouldn't necessarily need either. So there could still be a lot of the natural elements that are in there or whatnot that's taking place. And then, so I want to create almost that ideal thing for me would be, addressing, it would be, have those proportions in the right order, the right amount. Everything becomes that kind of more of an idealized state, but it becomes a statement. It all works together. You've got the concept of a cosmos, which is strict order, against chaos, which is disorder. So combining those two in a dynamic way. So like the contrails up here are fairly chaotic, whereas the trees would be fairly ordered. So you're playing off the two different things. And that's what you've got with art a lot. You've got all the art elements and principles, and each one you're using those in those contrasts to create a dynamic harmony that works for the painting. There are bushes like this, and this probably had 3 or 4 different photographs of these types of bushes that ended up getting put into here. So was that one actually there? I don't think that one actually was. That was probably from one photograph, and I might have another photograph of something, a tree, bushes kind of like these. The main thing with this was just getting this layered effect going back and creating kind of an interesting shaped thing. Starts mirroring some of the stuff that's going on in the clouds, various things like that. So I want to have something different than a photograph. I want to make it something that's more pure, more ideal, maybe more spiritual than a photograph potentially could be. I'm not dishing photography at all. It's just that there's so much more stuff that's going on in a photograph, whereas I can eliminate a lot of stuff, and this can be about other things rather than, that looks just like a photograph or something, which is kind of an interesting thing. A lot of times people say, well, that looks just like a photograph. And it's like, well, that's, in a way, that would be a failure, because I don't want it to look like a photograph. There is, the deepest level would probably be on a spiritual level. So, there's a connection with how the universe was made, how the landscape, how God made the landscape, using those same proportions that I use to construct the paintings. Because he created things in a certain way. It's just using some similar elements and similar processes to create something that wasn't there before. So that's the fascinating thing for me, is actually, you know, addressing more of the spiritual. You know, if somebody thinks this looks good behind their couch, that's great, but there are other layers going on. And I think over time, that's the other thing I would like people to discover, some of the different layers that are going on. I think the neatest thing would be 5 years down the road, somebody would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, go past the painting to get a glass of milk, and I didn't see that before.
Streaming is open until September 3rd, and we still have some wonderful pieces available. Please visit us in person at the Arts Fest, August 18th to 20th, or online at ajfinearts.net.